Before this video starts, this will be your one and only major spoiler warning for Undertale, Deltarune Chapters 1 through 3, including both the normal route and weird route, and Mother 3. If you have any intention of playing any of these 3 games anytime soon, if you haven't already, I would probably recommend that you click off of this video now unless you just don't care about spoilers. That's up to you though. This video also assumes that you've watched the first video on this channel, and although it is certainly not required, I would recommend that you watch that video before this one. So with that out of the way, Deltarune Chapter 5 is finally here. I played through the entire thing within the first 2 days of its launch, including the weird route, and I really enjoyed it. I got a lot of comments on my last video of people asking me what I thought about the chapter, so really quickly, I want to just talk about my opinions on the chapter as a whole to start this video off. For the most part, Chapter 5 was a lot lighter on the lore front than I was expecting it to be, and I admit that initially the chapter kind of underwhelmed me a bit because of that. But looking back on what the chapter does do as a whole, this was a really good chapter in my opinion. The 2D platforming segments in particular stand out to me as possibly the most fun part of not just the chapter, but the entire rest of the game thus far. It feels insanely satisfying just swinging Chris's sword around, all the platforming feels good, there wasn't a single one of these segments that feels like it's drawn out or overstaying its welcome. And it's also just such a cool and memorable idea on its own that I think it honestly kind of carries most of this chapter's gameplay by itself. You know, that, and also I grew up with Super Paper Mario, so that's always appreciated. That's not to say that I think the rest of the game is bad by any means, far from it. All that I'm saying is that this single addition to the game catapults Chapter 5 all the way to being my second favorite chapter, right behind 4. I also love all the usual things that Deltarune gets right. You know, the music, the humor, the characters, despite how much I desperately want to hate Flowery, I just can't because god, he's just such a cool character from a narrative level. Aqua is precious and must be protected at all costs, and did they pull out Miku for this shit? I'll get to you later. Also, just brief confession, I genuinely lost sleep over how disturbing the weird route was. But god damn if this wasn't the most insane scene in the entire game by far. The whole thing is just so weird and creepy, and it went deaf because of it, but I'll be damned if it wasn't worth it. This is like a top 3 or top 2 moment in the entire game for me thus far. What the? What? Oh! Okay, so now that I got most of my general thoughts about the chapter out of the way, let's talk about interpretation theory, huh? So first things first, I just have a quick question that I want to ask all of you. Where the hell did you all come from? I made this channel literally the day before I uploaded that first video, and I somehow managed to get over 1,000 subscribers and 40,000 views within like 2 weeks. And the video wasn't even up to date with the details that Chapter 5 gave us, but it is still getting views. I am genuinely at such a loss for words. Not that I'm complaining though. I am very grateful for all of the positive reception that the video got and all of the kind words in the comments. It means a lot to me. And although I left it pretty ambiguous if I would ever upload more to this channel after my first video, seeing the response to the video has only made me more motivated to keep uploading here. And since Chapter 5 came out, I've also had more ideas and theories that I want to turn into videos eventually. So all of you get to stay tuned for that. And once again, thank you all so much for the support. Second thing second, god damn does it feel good to be right. We have officially reached a point in Deltarune's lifespan where, at least to me, it feels like not every single theory in existence is immediately debunked by the release of a single chapter, like the calamity we saw occur with the 10 billion theories about the Roaring Knight's identity from the Chapter 2 era. And I am very happy to report back to you all that interpretation theory, for the most part, still holds up pretty well after Chapter 5. And as a matter of fact, in a few areas, the theory is actually stronger than it was before. Noel Angel is not only intact, but is also somehow even more likely than it was before, and let it be known that Rudy's death as a motivator for Noel creating the Angel's Heaven was a sizable chunk of my argument, and I have never been more happy to see someone's beloved father become critically injured. It seems like the Twisted Sword might actually lead to a third major route like I suggested, since it isn't possible to get the 5th Shadow Crystal on the weird route, and speaking of which, guess who wasn't the secret boss? To be fair, Friend, or, you know, the Friendlings, I guess, I'll touch on that later, didn't really have a significant role in the chapter at all, like everyone was suspecting, myself included, and I don't think anyone could have possibly guessed who the actual secret boss ended up being, but be so for real with me right now. If John probably was involved with Dessa's disappearance, Michael was tucked away behind that pink door and was that easy to miss, I'm sorry, but I genuinely believe that the game would have been worse off for it. Friend has to be more important than that in my opinion. Especially after the July 10th egg incident though, I'm not entirely confident on when or how Friend is going to show up anymore, but it's going to be tied to a crucial plot point somehow. I'm sorry if this section comes off as arrogant and all, I just felt like loading a little for fun. It's not that serious, I promise. Moving on from that though, I feel like it's probably more productive if this video focuses more on the things that I got wrong rather than I got right. So I want to spend some time to just address some of the holes that Chapter 5 punched in this theory. The big thing that I definitely got completely wrong was the reason why the secret bosses had the shadow crystals at all. During the Gaster tangent, I suggested that all of the crystal holders were Darkners, except for the Knight, that Gaster had experimented on to see if it was possible for any being to wield the amount of freedom that he wanted for himself. So this was just completely wrong. I wrote that entire section of the video under the impression that shadow crystals were made of determination, not the power of lost dreams. And even then, I have genuinely zero clue how Pink would fit into this part of the theory anyways, especially since her boss fight is by far the least serious of all the secret bosses in the game at the moment. Fitting her into this theory just doesn't sit right with me at all, and I think it's pretty safe to say that I was just completely off the mark here. I think most of that section of the video is probably off anyways, you know, barring Gaster ready the prophecy. I actually think that there's more evidence for that now, which I'll get into in a bit. So I'm just not even gonna bother trying to make part 2 of interpretation theory in the way that I had originally said I was considering. The video that you're watching now is what became of that idea for a follow-up. In spirit, you are currently watching part 2. I think the next most important thing to mention is that Ralsei is very much aware of the existence of other paths than just what is foretold by the prophecy, and that it is technically possible to divert off of it, unlike what I suggested originally. There are 2 things that imply this. 1, if you fail the quick time event in the weird route by letting Noelle and Chris sink too far into water without mashing proceed, the weird route becomes aborted, and the game just kinda abruptly snaps back to normal. I know that a lot of people said that it's not technically aborted because like the sound effect doesn't play, and I actually thought that for a while too, but no, that's just not what happens at all. The game still sets the same flag that it would for any other regular abort, so yeah, this counts. Sorry to disappoint everyone. When you find Ralsei in the Dark World after aborting though, his dialogue changes to be more fixated on Chris, clearly relieved that Chris is okay. He knows full well what was about to happen to Chris, which implies he knows about Side B, meaning that he does know about the existence of other paths. And 2, which is probably the bigger piece of evidence here, there's this little exchange that Ralsei has with Flowery towards the end of Chapter 5, regardless of if you did the normal route or weird route, where Flowery is taunting Ralsei for the millionth time this chapter. Although during this, Ralsei decides to reveal something pretty significant to my theory though. The reason that Ralsei is so dead set on there only being one ending is because if we do try to divert too far off of the prophecy, the entire thing just kind of collapses in on itself, and it leads to a worse outcome than there would have been before. Presumably the world's collapsing at the hands of the Roaring, if I had to take a guess. Or, you know, whatever the hell the weird route is about to become. Like, Jesus Christ, we just drowned those 2 kids, like, God. That perfectly segues into possibly the largest problem with the theory caused by Chapter 5. There are now clear examples of certain parts of the prophecy being flat out ignored rather than reinterpreted. On the weird route, because Chris never makes the Flower King Dark World, that fountain gets skipped over entirely, meaning that the Flower Man Trapped in Asylum prophecy panel literally cannot happen as Side B is reached, which means that it is very possible that the endings reached on the weird route and Twisted Sword route have very little to do with the last prophecy at all, rather than being reinterpretations of it like I so strongly believed until now. It's still not impossible that the other 2 endings mirror the last prophecy in some way, but it's no longer as likely anymore in my opinion. And I also think that Noelle and Chris presumably clipping out of bounds also hurts this idea as well, because how likely is it that they actually escape wherever they are and re-emerge so that they can have that final clash with Susie? While I'm here, I should probably also mention that the theory that we inserted another soul inside of Noelle is also pretty much dead now, since we are definitely not in control of her like I thought we were gonna be. In fact, that's more like the opposite of what actually happened. I admit that I still see a world where Noelle does have this massive angel transformation and somehow does re-emerge from wherever the hell she went to, thus allowing for the whole Noelle-Susie swap thing to still happen in tandem with the last prophecy. But at this rate, I kind of feel like it's more likely for that to just not happen at all. From the look of it, I wouldn't be surprised if Side B puts a much larger focus on the game's meta-narrative, on top of the consequences of sequence breaking like this in Deltarune's world. 2 incredibly vital parts of the prophecy are now gone. There is absolutely no way that this doesn't have dire consequences given what Ralsei implies. This doesn't just seem to me like it would be the last prophecy. This seems more like it would be a completely different outcome that is, quote, something even worse. Again, to reiterate, interpretation theory's main argument still holds up, and for what it's worth, the concept of the game having more than one ending still holds up very strongly. I would be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge that the Flower Man Trapped in Asylum can describe both Flowery and Asgore depending on how you look at it. I'm just less confident now that these endings will play out exactly how I proposed they would in my original video, and that is entirely the fault of the weird route. But let's imagine a hypothetical world where I did end up wrong, and Deltarune's endings do diverge from the last prophecy entirely. That still leaves the question of why Toby Fox is so insistent on the game only having one ending unaddressed. I don't think it's a good idea to just completely lie to your entire audience like that, but then what is one ending even supposed to mean, given that we have mountains of evidence telling us otherwise? It's probably impossible to say for sure, although in my last video, someone left a comment that I think could be a very possible answer to this question. This person, whose username is on screen, suggests that Deltarune's one ending might just be as simple as the game being closed. You can take as many different paths as you want, watch an infinite number of outcomes based on your actions, and yet all of it still leads to the exact same ending where the game is turned off. This idea, I think, holds up super well, honestly. For one, as this person points out, it kinda parallels Flowey's dialogue at the very end of Undertale's Shoot Pacifist ending. He begs you to not press that reset button and just let everyone be happy, somewhat like if he were quote-unquote banishing you from the game. Now, of course, he's not actually banishing you. There's nothing stopping you from ignoring him and resetting anyways. Like, it's definitely not a perfect parallel. But ultimately, the fact of the matter is that by closing the game, your tie to it is severed. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that this could probably be what the Angel's banishment looks like under Player Angel. But even more so than that, I actually think that this theory also works really well with all of the game's imagery of dreams, especially after Chapter 5. Deltarune itself is very dreamlike in a lot of ways, down to the very thing that sparked the idea for the game being a fever dream Toby had like 15 years ago. And Chapter 5's ending, I think, pushes this idea that even if you're only looking into a dream for a fleeting moment, getting even just a glimpse of the fantastical world that resides within that dream makes it all worth it, even if ultimately all dreams end with you waking up. I honestly don't think that Deltarune is taking the angle of teaching a moral lesson about how we interact with fiction like a lot of people believe before Chapter 5, and especially before 3 and 4. I'm honestly starting to think now that its primary focus is about the joy that fiction and dreams can provide, even if that experience always ends with you being separated from that world. It really is about the journey and not the destination, especially if that destination is when your Switch runs out of battery mid-playthrough and corrupts all of your save data in the process. I basically immediately fell in love with this theory when I read this comment, so huge shoutouts to this person. And whether they end up correct or not, I still think that this is a sick idea. A bit of a sloppy segue here, but I want to circle back to talking about the prophecy itself for a bit, particularly in its relation to Gaster. I still very much believe that Gaster wrote the prophecy, as I said earlier, since there's still a ton of evidence supporting that, and as far as I'm currently aware, Chapter 5 doesn't introduce anything to suggest that this wouldn't be the case. If anything, there's actually more than I was able to find to back this up. What's more important, though, is that this extra evidence does more than just reiterate that Gaster created the prophecy. It also gestures towards some possible answers about the very nature of Deltarune's world itself. It might even get us closer to answering one of Deltarune's longest standing questions that we've had since Chapter 1. Let's talk about the eggs. The Forgotten Man and the eggs that he gives you have been one of the most mysterious parts of Deltarune since the very start. It's been up for debate about how important these eggs actually are for a long time, because the game labels them as not too important, but also not too unimportant. The purpose of these eggs doesn't seem like it's something that we're going to be even remotely close to answering until the very end of the game. Or is it? I found another YouTube comment, which to be clear is usually not a very good source of theory crafting, but for some reason these two comments that I found just happened to pop off insanely hard. I don't know how or why, they just kinda did. That I found on someone's upload of the Chapter 5 Egg Room song, where someone was doing what YouTube commenters so often do and quoting something only semi-related to the actual video. This is dialogue from the fight against Blue and Yellow in Chapter 5. If you get Chapter 5's egg before this fight, during the sections where you're playing Ace Attorney and selecting evidence to prove which flower is guilty of what crime, the egg appears as an option that you can select. Its description reads, quote, "It's evidence. You'll know what it was evidence for when it happens." You know, typical Penumbra vape posting. In that YouTube comment that quoted this dialogue, though, someone else left a reply that caught my attention. The quote about the eggs from in-game reminded this person about an item from Mother 3 called the Hummingbird Egg, or the Egg of Light. Now, as of me writing the script and recording this video, I have yet to play Mother 3. I have played and beaten Earthbound, it's a very good game. Have not touched Beginnings or Mother 3 yet. So just take this with a grain of salt, so there might be details that I'm missing here. But, according to this reply, the villagers of Lucas's hometown, which I'm just going to call Tazumili Village, as per what it is officially translated as in Smash Bros. Brawl, all had their memories of their original world sealed away so that they could start new lives in Tazumili, only for Porky, the game's main antagonist, to come along and build a new world on top of it, industrializing the entire town. What this person doesn't mention that I found afterwards that I think is probably important is that the people of Tazumili immigrated to the village after their original world was destroyed. And then after arriving, they eventually decided to give themselves new lives and new identities entirely, which is why they sealed all of their old memories inside of the Egg of Light to begin with. Okay, so first off, I have a question for every Deltarune theorist who has also played Mother 3. Why the hell did none of you tell me about this earlier? This literally perfectly explains everything about the eggs in Deltarune. You know why Gaster says that his Deltarune is still waiting? Because his Deltarune is his version of the game that he built on top of the original world. The version of the prophecy that we see in-game is not the original. It is a version that was modified to Gaster's own liking. And the reason that he considers the eggs to be a quote-unquote issue, according to Deltarune's PlayStation achievements, are because the eggs contain knowledge of what the original version of Deltarune was before Gaster came along and changed it. They are evidence for the existence of another Deltarune, hence why they are not too important, but not too unimportant. Because how important really is it at the end of the day that the prophecy is a derivative work? This was just sitting under our noses for an entire year. Did we seriously all miss this for that long? Nah, probably not. It's not like any of my theories are original anyways. Now, as for the Forgotten Man himself, okay, I definitely can't tell you exactly who this guy is or everything about what he wants because we just don't have enough information on that yet. Originally, I was just gonna skim past him because I had absolutely nothing to talk about. He's still almost completely shrouded in mystery at the moment. But for some reason, Tricky Toady decided to just randomly drop a lore bomb about Image Friend 2 weeks after the game came out, which is also notably partially locked behind obtaining Chapter 5's egg. Apparently, according to Pink's body, who I'm just gonna call Mew Mew, Image Friend is not just one cat. It is an entire species of ravenous little friendlings that will hunt down anything with protein in it for sport. It's gotten so bad in some cases that some people have had to go into hiding or even change their appearance entirely just to get away from these little freaks. When this dialogue was first discovered, there was a lot of discussion that I saw on social media over Mimi's line about people going into hiding and changing their appearance. Most people, from what I've seen, linked this detail back to Des and or Spamton, both of which could fit the role of either running away or changing their appearance to get away from Friend. While I'm not really here to argue against either of these two being who Mew Mew was referring to here, even though I'm not fully sold on the Des interpretation admittedly, I would like to go to bat for another candidate that I've seen floating around. And if you couldn't tell by now, I think that this line is first and foremost about the Forgotten Man. For one, why else would this dialogue require you to have obtained Chapter 5's egg in order to access it? If the man wasn't relevant to this lore dump at all, it would be nonsensical to lock this little monologue behind one of the eggs that he gives you. Plus, Mimi mentions that the friendlings are all mostly after protein, a vitamin that eggs are famously rich in. How the hell did so many of you have to Google that? In my mind, if the friendlings really like protein, and the Forgotten Man is giving these protein-rich eggs away from you, and is also telling you to forget about him as we see in Chapter 3's egg room. This guy is absolutely trying to get away from the cats for his own safety. He has 5 of these eggs. He is a walking friend magnet. If any of them find him, he's practically dead on the spot. But more importantly than just the Forgotten Man's motivations, I think the theory about why Gaster dislikes the eggs actually works extremely well as an answer to why the friendlings would be after them to begin with. The friendlings aren't actually after the protein. They're after the evidence. My guess as to what they're doing here is that they're trying to get rid of any evidence that Gaster modified Deltarune's world at all. Probably in order or conditioned to do so by Gaster himself. I mean, like, if the friendlings weren't working under Gaster, why else would they bite, quote, very, very hard? There's a weird debate happening right now in the community as to whether the someone that owns the pack of friends is Gaster or Eram. And while I have my own theory about that, it ties into another much larger theory that I plan on making my next video about, so for now, I'm just gatekeeping it, sorry in advance. No matter what though, I'm mostly just shocked at how well this new lore drop slots in with my new Gaster theory, and it really excites me since it's probably a sign that I'm right on the money here. But now, to finally round out the video, I want to pivot over to a different topic really quickly. So the weird route, right? I've talked about it a lot throughout the entire video, and I definitely could have got into this at any of those points, but I saved this segment for last because what I'm about to delve into might be one of the most crucial details in the entire game, and it has the potential to completely shatter our understanding of what Deltarune's ending will look like in its entirety, or to just be the most nothing thing ever that I'm just overhyping. In all honesty, the latter of those two potential outcomes is probably far more likely, but ever since I played the weird route, there's been this little voice in my head telling me that Deltarune might be far, far more complex than we thought it would be. You know how in interpretation theory, I said that I think that Deltarune is probably going to have at least 3 endings? Like I said earlier, the weird route seems to basically confirm that the Twisted Sword is going to lead to its own major ending, a side C if you will, that will require aborting the weird route. Originally, I theorized that equipping the Thorn Ring onto Noelle in Chapter 4 would lock you into the Weird Route, and that the Twisted Sword would only be able to obtain by aborting the Weird Route in Chapter 2. And like I said earlier, Chapter 5 disproved this assumption basically immediately because it is very possible to abort the route. And on top of that, with Noelle likely returning to the Dark World in Chapter 6, you're probably gonna have the opportunity to get the Thorn Ring back from her without aborting in Chapter 2. But this creates several new questions. What happens if you abort in a chapter before 5? Can you still keep the Thorn Ring if you did the chapter 2 abort? And what I think is probably most important, how is this abort going to change the game's narrative? Because if Noelle realizes that the dream she had did in fact happen, I feel like it'd be kind of weird if she just reacted normally to that, especially if you abort in chapter 5. Like really, I highly doubt that the normal route is going to continue completely as normal. No shot that there isn't at least some level of change, right? What happens if you don't make the Twisted Sword? Does the game just continue on the normal route with only minor changes? Why is there this new unused item in the game files called a Gilded Rose that appears as if it were the opposite of the Thorn Ring? Is this just the Thorn Ring but transformed somehow? And like how the hell is it going to tie into everything else? There's no way that this isn't somehow relevant, right? Does Deltarune have 4 routes? Is there a 4th path available if you abort the weird route in chapter 5, but then don't make the Twisted Sword? Can you even make the Twisted Sword if you abort in chapter 5? Because I actually think it's very possible that the Gilded Rose is the Thorn Ring, just transformed after something. I don't know what that something is, but I'd wager it's tied to an aborted weird route. And this is why I saved this tangent for last, because I just don't know if there's any telling what's actually going to happen at this point. If I am correct and the Thorn Ring becomes the Gilded Rose after aborting Chapter 5's weird route, then that would mean that the Twisted Sword can only be obtained after aborting in Chapter 2 or possibly Chapter 4, which might suggest the existence of a 4th path. Is that actually what's going to happen? I don't know. I think it's actually probably more likely that the Thorn Ring becomes the Gilded Rose if you kept it after aborting in Chapter 2, so now you have a new, stronger weapon for Noelle to use in Chapter 6, and also so you can't get that Twisted Sword that way. But I also think that there's a chance that it's just not that, and that a side D actually does exist somehow. It feels like there are just so many possible ways that this can go, and I am just losing my mind trying to keep track of all the possibilities. Which is also why I still think only 3 paths is more likely, just so that they can keep things easier on the development team. But like, what if they do it anyways? This one single scene somehow managed to spark so many questions about what in God's name is going to happen at the end of this game, all of which probably need to somehow be accounted for, and I just can't help but wonder how far Deltarune's dev team is willing to go. Although I feel like it's unlikely, I cannot help but feel that the possibility exists that Deltarune has, at minimum, 4 different routes, and if not more. Which is why I am absolutely terrified of Chapter 7, and frankly, you probably should be too. Just real quickly before wrapping this video up, I want to just briefly mention something that has literally nothing to do with Deltarune at all. I need to confess something. Psychic Fire is not actually my first YouTube channel. I have another YouTube channel called Jacob Ablaze that I started last year, where I talk about competitive Pokemon, VGC, not Smogon, sorry. I haven't uploaded there in a while, but if you want to hear more from me and aren't interested in VGC at all, I would definitely recommend going to check that out. I don't plan on abandoning that channel at all, although if I'm posting over there, it's probably just because I don't feel like talking about Deltarune and vice versa. And if I'm not posting on either, blame college.